is August 24th, 2018, and we're speaking with Dr. Shelly Valdez from Laguna, Pueblo. We are joined by our videographer, Dr. Beverly Singer, and our project intern, Jonna Paven. This interview is being conducted by Rose Diaz, IPCC project coordinator. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
I'd like to share some of your personal and work history as background before moving into the interview. You have a fascinating background and a fascinating story to tell. Dr. Valdez is the daughter of Lucille and Robert Valdez and one of 5 siblings. She is a member of the Turkey clan and a child of the Lizard clan. Born in Albuquerque in 1961, she is a proud product of the public education system in New Mexico. She attended Laguna Acoma High School, the College of Santa Fe for K-8 education, received a master's in multicultural teaching and educational technology, and received her PhD, where she added science education to her credentials. Both of her postgraduate degrees were awarded by the University of New Mexico. She is the mother of Kyle Swimmer, a 2018 graduate of New Mexico Tech, who majored in environmental engineering. She states, "I consider my father my true teacher. He has a poetic way of amplifying our cultural worldview of science, and for this reason I developed a passion and advocacy for science learning from an indigenous lens. I'm a product of community-based and holistic education, which will continue on with my son." Shelly is an entrepreneur, business owner, and consultant on educational curriculum for many types of schools, especially in rural areas. As owner and president of Native Pathways, Inc., and an accomplished potter. She is an active board member and advisor to many national and international programs, and served as a board member of the Laguna Department of Education from 2003 to 2009. For a period of time, her family spent time in Roswell, New Mexico, where her father was chief of security for FICOL Corporation, a training program for Native Americans that was part of relocation and self-determination efforts. Later, he became the director of the Indian Police Academy. It was in Roswell, as a first grader, that she was introduced not only to many other Native peoples, but also to the discrimination and prejudice that comes from life in a border community. Later, the family lived in Kansas, but missed that connection to their Laguna community and returned soon thereafter. I'd like to begin this interview by focusing on your views on community-based education through an indigenous lens. What does that mean, and how is it carried through from generation to generation?
As stated earlier, that I feel that I am a product of community-based education with the wonderful environment my father provided for me, and of course my mother. I learned so much from her as well. The gifts that I have, I try to give and extend to other youth that are interested in their culture and looking at the parallels with academia, Western academia. So community-based education is really about amplifying the culture, the environment that we are planted in, and using that environment as a resource, as a tool to guide you through this Western academia systems, the systems that we have to go through, and using the environment, which is part of that rich culture that we come from as indigenous people, to maybe not necessarily parallel, but or integrate, to show and amplify. When they talk about chemistry, where is chemistry found within our culture? It's our whole culture is, I believe, is science-based. And so showing a child or a youth that the Western education system, the area of chemistry, is found within so many areas of the indigenous culture and the traditions that we live daily. And so, of course, there are different levels of chemistry, and then you just learn to apply those levels and to show that student or that youth or community member that this is where photosynthesis is found. What they call in Western education photosynthesis, we call it this in our language. We don't have the Western names, the European names of those content areas that are under disciplines found in Western academia. We have our own poetic names, and they don't necessarily parallel. They don't necessarily say, well, this is photosynthesis. It's more of a poetic and metaphoric way of speaking the process of photosynthesis. So really it's all about, community-based education is about showing and amplifying that true essence of our culture and our traditions that are so rich with all these Western academia content areas.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure. As I look at fractals, mathematics, when you look at fractals, and fractals are all over, and they kind of define who we are as human beings. And there's line, like you look at my palm of my hand, and you look at lines in the fractals and where they move around. You can really give that wonderful example of fractals by using just pottery and the line work that our Pueblo women, the Pueblo potter, there's men in pottery too, but Pueblo artists, the line work they use in pottery, that's really geometry. A lot of geometry is found within pottery, and then you can get into the deeper mathematical concepts of fractals. You look at our architecture, the very essence of the architecture and the theories that our Pueblo ancestors had or created. I'm calling them theories, but that's a Western concept. But you look at how the notion of how they use the universe to align some of their buildings and use astronomy. Astronomy was so important, and they amplified astronomy within some of their structures. And the wonderful, I think the most richest example is at Chaco Canyon. That's our homeland. And if you look at the architecture within Chaco, it's very much aligned. It gives poetic justice of how astronomy lended itself to our cultural lens and to our cultural knowledge. And so I think an honoring of that relationship, our ancestors built those structures to amplify the astronomy that we so much depend on. I hope that was...
Yeah, those are great examples. What has been your experience with the Western view of education and today's curriculum for Indigenous people?
I struggled with it. I struggled with it when I was in school. And hate was not a word in our family. But boy, let me tell you, I hated school. I just didn't want to be in school because my teachers didn't know how to honor my culture. And I'd get so excited about a concept, and I'd raise my hand, and I wanted to share, this is how it applies in my culture. But a few times my teacher shut me down. And even when I would speak up, they would tell me, that's mythology. And so what does that do to a child? What does that do to a child? And so many examples lie around in our educational system. And so I learned that I didn't want to be in school. I didn't like school. And that's why I became a teacher. Because my father, he instilled this passion for science and mathematical understanding. Because these are explicit within our culture. And he took my book learning and showed me examples in our cultural understanding of these knowledge systems. So today's educational systems, I think, are really disheartening. They continue to be disheartening for Native youth. Native people that go through them, because there's that separation gap. You look at the standards, very European constructed. You look at the tests, they're not written for us. They're written for a Western urban student. Even if the native child lives in an urban area, that doesn't mean that they understand that system. It's just that they're planted there. They're there probably because of relocation of their parents, but they still are disconnected from that system and that worldview of thinking, our knowledge systems. So even as indigenous people, I see so many of my colleagues that embrace that system. We got to get ahead. We got to get ahead. We got to push our kids to education. Well, they are getting an education at home. Maybe push them to a Western education, but we're forgetting how rich our knowledge is within our own communities, and that scares me. So we really need to decolonize ourselves, all of us, to stop thinking Westernly, to stop thinking, well, we have to, get our kids to meet this GPA or this, this hierarchy of learning. They'll do it on their own if you give them that community-based education environment. I think our educators really need to rethink when they're writing curriculum, and I'm struggling with one community I'm helping to rewrite the curriculum because they really want to go indigenous knowledge systems, put in their culture and their language, but they're still telling me I have to write it to standards. I have to meet the standards. And to me, that's not embracing. You got to let go of those standards. We got to fight to create our own standards. We have to, this recent lawsuit, Yazzie and Martinez is a perfect example of the inequalities in our own New Mexico system. You take that a step farther, and you need to bring in curriculum that really amplifies our knowledge systems and really go to that next level of saying, okay, well, even the standards, even the student benchmarks are not aligned to who we are as Native people. So why do we continue to embrace them? Yes, it's for money, but we have to all band together to change that paradigm of those policymakers, of the people that are in charge of dispensing the funds for education. Because really, we need to honor our ancestors and what they fought for, and the legacy of who we are as we exist as Indigenous people. And for me, I struggle because even our own people are saying, well, we need to do this, but they're still thinking this. And how do we decolonize completely?
Even in schools that have community-based education,
Right.
This is still happening?
Oh yeah, it's still happening.
Is it just the easiest thing to do?
I think so. I think because they're so engulfed in systems and reporting and bylaws that they just continue to amplify those systems and to do just disjustice to our youth. And until we, excuse my language, but burn down those schools and take them back out to the cornfields and take them back out to the land, then we're going to continue to hurt our children. Mm-hmm. And I'm an advocate of burn down the schools. And because they're four walls, they have little windows, there's no access to that outdoor landscape that is just rich and beautiful with so much knowledge. I'm a radical.
You've chosen not to work as a classroom teacher. What prompted that decision?
I had a long conversation with my father, Shea, about when I finished my PhD, because I got, invited to go into the academia, higher education academia. And again, because I struggled with the ideas and Western philosophy of education, I just couldn't see myself being a part of that system. I probably would have gotten fired the first month because I would have wanted to change, well, why are we teaching this way? We should be teaching that way. And I think, in the conversations with my father, Shea, and some colleagues, I felt that I could make a bigger impact directly targeting Indigenous youth programs, directly targeting communities, versus being in a university and having an array of students from different backgrounds and races. I wanted to take my work to really impact mainly Native youth and Native communities, and those programs that wanted to do wanted to give a just partnership, do just partnerships, relationships with Native people. So that means corporations. I work sometimes with corporations that are looking at diversity, that are looking at better ways to reach out to Native communities. And so looking at education from my worldview, from an Indigenous worldview, I thought that it would be best to do it outside of the classic higher educational institute system that America, embraces, and I wanted to do. I wanted to really give wholeheartedly back to my people for what they've gifted to me, and much more the honoring that my father and my mother shared, the education environment that they shared with me, and I'm a product of it, and I know it works.
What would you call yourself in your language? There's the teacher part, there's the radical part, there's the activist part. Is there a word in your language for, besides mom?
Besides mom, Naya.
So
You're the mother. You become the mother of children, of students, and my whole life, my passion. And I get really emotional when I think deeply about this. It's about children. Because I don't want them to suffer the same inequalities that I did. And for that, I do what I do for the love of my people, for the love of the youth.
you are a leader in changing the dynamics of the current pedagogy and paradigms for Indigenous communities. How does that carry on into your local and international work?
Wow. So much rich partnerships, so many colleagues I call friends. I think that, from a local level, when creating access and portals for youth that aren't necessarily afforded to them by the outside mainstream society, if I'm involved in that environment, oh boy, I'm going to share that with youth. So I constantly share things with youth that they can access, whether it be Western academia environments or portals for employment, or if it's something, a grant an opportunity that they might access to build capacity within their community. That's my role. I see that as my role because I'm in there. I'm in that field. Mm-hmm. And it's sad because I have that title. It's really sad because I have that title. In my community, I'm not even an elder yet. I look forward to being an elder someday. I'm still considered a youth, but you know what? Youth can help other youth, and youth can help other community. And so my own community, Laguna, I try very hard to create these wonderful opportunities for youth that can see the worldview maybe outside their community, such as the culture exchange, the Yakanao Indigenous Culture Exchange, that I'm a co-coordinator with my friend and ally and sister, Dr. Isabel Hawkins. She is an astrophysicist. She comes from Argentina. She has a beautiful relationship with all the Mesoamerica, well, a lot of the Mesoamerica communities and our relatives down south. I'm a Pueblo. I have a passion for working with Pueblo youth. And so together we have the Yakanao Indigenous Youth Culture Exchange that brings those communities back together, and it honors our ancestral understanding of trade routes, of migration, because it's there's research evidence in Chaco about those trade systems that were once part of those environments. So internationally, we take the kids back and forth to share this knowledge. And it's to help them remember and help them reignite the spirit of their ancestors, and to help them really embrace who they are as Indigenous people, because they have so much to offer the world, and to create leadership so that they can have safe environments for sharing their voice, and to create portals for, if they want to work on bringing back midwifery within their tribal communities. That's one of the new projects we're doing with our female Yakanao youth young ladies that are both from Mesoamerica and from the Pueblos. We're starting, we got a grant, and we're starting to work with the youth to bring back the knowledge of midwifery. So much science in that. Oh, it's powerful what we're unearthing, and that they get to share and exchange within their own local communities. So you look at it at an international level. That was an example from a community-based to an international. And then my other work with the international community is really based on, I can't speak for my community. I am Native, and I grew up in that community environment, in that community-based education environment. So sharing my story maybe can help change paradigms, and taking, you can't physically take our Yakanao youth with you, but we can tell their story as well. And it creates, hopefully, a more richer environment for gaining knowledge about Indigenous people that is missing from the history books. Oh my gosh, if they would only know our story, our real story. I think that needs to happen. So,
how did you fall into getting this idea about this group?
The Yakanao?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that story. So it's based on my son, Kyle. My son is my world. He's just a gift that I'm so honored to be given, and to share this little bit of my window of life with him has just been beautiful. So, as stated earlier, one of my colleagues and sisters and allies is Isabel Hawkins, Dr. Hawkins, and we both work with Chaco Canyon. We sit on their Friends of Chaco board, and oftentimes we go there and we take colleagues to hang out and talk scientific story. Most of them are from the science world. And so one fall, I think it was during the fall, we had a group of science people from NASA and NSF and some Pueblo people. And of course, Kyle, I tried to take him everywhere I could with me. I think that, again, going back to that, there's more education out in the environment than you get in the school system. So he went with me almost everywhere as much as possible. And so one of those weekends, he went out to Chaco. chocolate with us, and he was with his best friend Mike. And they were doing their own thing. We went on a day hike, and we were sitting there waiting for them. They were, coming up slowly, and we were sitting at one of the right below one of the archaeological ruins, and we were watching them walking. And so one of the NASA scientists asked, why aren't there any Pueblo youth here? Why don't you see them? Isn't this their homeland? And that's where the Yakanao Indigenous Culture Exchange emerged from, is that story. And we wholeheartedly want to bring them back, and we do the equivalent down in Mesoamerica. We have so many great partners that are equivalent to the national park systems here. I love our work with the national park systems. We work with Mesa Verde, Chimney Rock, Aztec, all the areas where there's Pueblo ancestral ruins, and then the Mesoamerica communities where they be. And so we work with kids from Guatemala, Yucatan, upper side of Mexico, there's Zapotec, Argentina, Peru. We have kids from all over. And our kids are technically young adults, 18 to however long you want to call yourself a youth. And so I think that the premise is really about re-engaging them and reigniting that spirit of their love of their culture and love of their culture through science.
How old is the organization?
It's 10 plus years old. We've done 10 culture exchanges, going back and forth. And then we are doing many projects for these next several years. We just finished a project with the males. The males wanted to do something on agriculture. Oh, that was an awesome project. So they wanted to reignite the spirit of agriculture among the youth, because the youth are not, they're eating a lot of processed food, and they're not growing their own food no more because it's too hard. And why is it too hard? Why are we so indulged in feeling that we need to go to McDonald's and get a burger when we can, cook, go out hunting and, hang that meat, that deer meat, and use it when we're hungry and make venison burgers or make our traditional stews out of venison or roast the corn. Why are we so invested or vested in taking the easy way out? And boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if our stores in our community could be filled with nothing but what we grow from our earth. And so that's one of the projects that really is an example of digging in deep and trying to get the youth to realize that they have a beautiful gift of farming. Not only, and then they exchange this knowledge. It's really great to see the exchange of knowledge. For example, the Mayan youth, they build their mounds for the corn really up high, and they don't have the burrows because they get so much water, rainfall. They live in semi-climatic rain areas, but they're very similar to the Pueblos because they don't have no rivers within the Yucatan area. So we depend on dry farming. In a sense, they do as well. And we talk about their growing season. Theirs is year-round. Ours is a specific time of year. And then they trade seeds. That's what our ancestors did. And then they grow, and then they share pictures and sometimes, bring the seeds back so that they can exchange them again. So it's really interesting, that science, that dynamic of science, community-based science that they're learning and that they're garnering. But also, again, it's reigniting those old relationships that our Puebloan ancestors had. And for the hurtful circumstance that came when the conquerors, the conquistadors, and the Europeans came from America, we lost. And so, not necessarily totally, we're just trying to reignite it.
this has been a decades-long project. Do you have one specific project that has really gotten to your heart?
Oh, all of it. All of it. All of it is to my heart. To hear these kids talk about rescuing their language, rescuing their culture, rescuing their ways of being and knowing, it's at heart. And it's so emotional. We come away with so much emotion that we're just naturally high on this emotion of what the kids share among each other and the commitment they have to want to change their communities, to want to do good for their communities. And they also talk about the continued injustice that the Americas have with the paradigms of European ancestry. And we talk about that. And how can they help and support one another? How can they become activists, but in a good way, in a healthy way?
How does your work with Native Pathways, Chaco Canyon, Indigenous Youth Culture Exchange, for example, sustain your belief in radical advocacy for change in curriculum?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. It does, because let me tell you why. The youth that we work with, and I am the evaluator, and I'm working with youth evaluators within the program to try to groom them and to look at evaluation, the world of evaluation from an Indigenous lens. And so some of the outcomes from the culture exchange are unbelievable. Unbelievable that they transcend into the academia, the Western academia. A lot of our youth that have come out that recently graduated, including Kyle, my son, he graduated from New Mexico Tech in environmental engineering. They take a lot of what they learn within the culture exchange and they use it to their advantage within their academia. And so they might come up with research projects or research papers that they'll ask Isabel and me to help them. Can you edit this? Can you? And so there's that constant connection with the youth they work with, and that really enriches the Western academia. So a lot of our kids are coming out with degrees that are focused on community-based education, that are focused on degrees that they know that they can take back and help their communities. All of our kids that we work with, they're service, well, any Native kid, they're service-oriented. When they go to school, they don't go to school for themselves. They go to school because they want to give something back. They want to support their community the best way they know how, and these are vehicles and tools that they can support the community with. But we're pushing the paradigm of taking that indigenous knowledge and making it part of that mainstream system. And it's one by one child at a time. You can do it. Anyone can do it.
So flying under the radar.
Oh, yeah. And our kids, wow. Mesoamerica kids, Pueblo kids, they're coming out with some fantastic leadership skills, Western academia degrees, and they're also being sought after within their own communities for their leadership and their knowledge. And that, what more can you ask for? Is that you've helped to create a strong person with this incredible, rich identity that says, I am Native.
That's very powerful. You spoke a little bit about the evaluation on these grassroots programs that you're affiliated with. Can you give us some examples of the criteria for evaluating?
Do you want me to focus on the Yaka now or just evaluation broadly?
Broadly.
Okay, broadly. I've been working in evaluation for, I would say, roughly 15 years. And boy, is it Science is its own world, and evaluation and learning is its own world as well. And they fit, the evaluation fits within science, but at a little different lens. And that same thing, rock your socks off, because here's some indigenous people coming in and saying, no more, no more. You can't tell our story the way you've been telling our stories with what you call objectivity, but it's coming from your lens, that objectivity, and your alignment systems and your content areas don't necessarily do justice for telling that story. So I've been really lucky because I've been lucky because I've created these wonderful relationships with so many science people and so many educators, just people I call my friends. And in the Western academia, you call them allies. And so these are non-natives that really want to support and help you create this portal for creating policy change and paradigm shifts within the evaluation world. And I think there's an uprising and among indigenous people that are looking at data sovereignty, that are looking at methods and tools we use for evaluation. There's not necessarily a specific framework that I see. I mean, there are some that have created frameworks. I think it's more of a process. It's the process that you use to enter an environment, and the process includes becoming a storyteller, and that's natural among natives. So I love telling people's story with the tools of Western evaluation, but it's the process of how you approach it. So I have been working with this colleague, my sister, for about 12, 13 years, and her name is Jill Stein, and she is based out of Portland, Oregon, and she's Jewish. So even with that, we have some very similarities. So we created, as far as I know, this is the only partnership that lends itself to this. We call it collaborative evaluation. Oh boy, it's fun. Because Jill comes from the Western academia lens, and I come from that indigenous worldview, and we just have this wonderful marriage together where we walk together and we create the story together. So we support one another. And we've had fun, and so much fun. I can't even tell you how many projects we've worked with, a lot. And I mean, you can find some of the evaluation reporting on a website called CASE, and CASE is funded by CAISE. It's funded by the National Science Foundation, and so they like our work and they share it. So there's examples of our work that we've walked together and created for these projects we work with. So I think it's really about finding the allies and finding the support to help push your agenda, if you want to call it an agenda, because the agenda is loaded with so many negative stories of what evaluation and research has done within Native communities. Our agenda is to change that rhetoric and to change the way we approach evaluation and to push those paradigms and to push those doors open. I can't push the doors open by myself. We need allies. And so I hope that gave you an example of...
Yeah, that was great. You talk about, having been born and raised in Laguna and participating in all of the community things that I'm curious as to what is the importance of maintaining cultural ceremonies and rites for an individual in the community?
Oh, That's our life. And without our culture, we wouldn't exist. And we have been through so many hurt histories. Our pathway is full of those hurt histories. And we owe it to our ancestors to carry on what they fought so hard to maintain. We owe it to them. And if we choose to embrace more Western education and living off the reservation and not coming home, if you live off the reservation, not coming home to take part in ceremonies, to take part in your culture activities, and ceremony is every day, then we are choosing to not exist. And we can't do that. We can't do that because my grandfathers, my grandmothers, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, in all indigenous communities fought for our survival. So we cannot negate that. We can't stop remembering what they gifted us with, and they fought so hard to survive. And the Western world and Western society needs to honor that and needs to help because they're living on our land. They're living and reaping from our natural resources. What are they going to do to help us to survive, to help us to continue our way of being? You can't do it by fracking because you taint the soils, you taint the water, you taint the human life, the DNA. It needs to stop. And instead, use that energy, you oil companies, to help us to continue our way of life. It's very, very important. And it's very important Native kids come home as much as they can. Quit making excuses. Come home to go help clean the ditches, to go help when they prepare the water for planting, to come home to dance for feasts, to come home to help grandma, with her pottery. Go get pottery shards for her, go get clay for her, or whoever the potter is. To come home, to learn. And if there's no one to help you to teach, within your own family, you have the community. Go find them. Don't be lazy. Our kids are becoming too lazy now. They want to eat McDonald's, including me, because I travel so much. I don't have time to, cook because I'm living in hotels. But, to really know where that food comes from. I remember some of the youth saying when we picked one of the harvests, so this is the Yakanao project. And I was talking to them, we were eating some roasted corn, and one of the young boys said, it's such hard work to be a Pueblo farmer. It's such hard work. But when you taste that ear of corn, it's so worth it. So worth it.
I think it's interesting that you tie your ancestors to resilience, survival, sustainability. And that seems to me part of your teaching is that if we don't do these things, we won't exist. Am I right? Wrong?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, your grandparents and bringing the community together is really useful as a tool to help understand what's going on.
Right. That transfer of knowledge is so important. Even the elders, some of the elders are afraid to transfer the knowledge. They hold on to protect it, but they don't realize that if they leave this earth, that knowledge goes with them. So that transfer of knowledge is so necessary. So you need to bring both elders, young adults, and youth together in an educational environment outside of that Western school system. And, do it in a good way. in the way that our ancestors
Yeah.
taught us.
One of the things that impressed us when you came in to talk with us was your passion for humor as a powerful place for healing and balance. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's just, the brain is so incredible. If you really read research on the brain, oh my gosh, you'll see that it's attached to humor. And I feel that, we talk about core values. I really, truly believe that we are missing one of the most important key core values. It's that ability to laugh. And humor does that. And humor is a way of healing. We have societies based on humor. We have societies, and that humor, if you really intently listen, it's a way of healing the mind, body, and soul. It's a way of overcoming conflict. It's a way of resilience. And humor is a medicine. It truly is a medicine. And if you read research on the brain, many of the, and I'm coming from a Western lens now, many of the most smartest people are those that have the ability to use and navigate humor. So if you look at the brain and how the brain works, research will tell you that when you put a child in an environment that is has less fear, it's positive, it's built around positivity and positive processes, that and you use humor at the beginning, then the brain becomes relaxed, and then you're willing. Then your portals for learning are more open. So when the brain's relaxed, you start eating this knowledge, and it builds within you. So relaxing the brain is really important for an educational environment to transfer knowledge. And when you start off with the idea of using humor, telling a crazy story or telling a joke, then laughter fills the environment, and then learning comes in. And you're more likely to retain that knowledge when your brain is relaxed. Mm-hmm. And so humor is key. And I really think that it's when they talk about core values, particularly with Pueblo people, they're missing one. It's the core value of humor, and it's a medicine.
Well, we were just really impressed with that whole discussion about, humor, and you made us laugh a lot, so we thought we should include that question.
You want to hear a funny story real quick?
Sure.
About humor? Okay, so one of the things one of the stories I tell when I'm working with scientists and about the contributions of indigenous people in the area of science. So one day we were having a ceremony at Laguna, it was feast time, and we were in the plaza, and that's where most of our dances take place. And there was this grandmother watching, she was sitting behind us, and there was this grandmother that was calling her granddaughter, Ciao, Hawaii. And the little girl didn't pay attention. She kept playing, she was playing in the sand with a couple of other kids. And then the grandmother's voice rose, Ciao, Hawaii. So, naturally the granddaughter, okay, she means business, so I better go over. So the grandmother, the little girl goes over to the grandmother, and she tells her, come close, notions her to come close. And the grandmother goes, puts, flats her hair, and then we turn around, she goes, Indian Moose. So you never know, we might have invented the concept of moose.
That's true. So we're going to go to some extra questions that we have for you.
Okay.
You were Miss Indian World in 1985 with a later interest in acting. What did those experiences mean to you?
Oh, yeah, that was a pretty interesting chapter in my life. I was really honored to, of course, be Miss Indian World, and there's a funny story behind that, but we won't go there. But it was just the most incredible experience that I accidentally walked into, and for that I'm honored because I have so many wonderful friends. I was gifted with so many opportunities to travel and to experience things that possibly I may not have had if that portal wasn't there. And so I had fun, and I got to do things that I never thought that I would do, and it was just a fun time in my life. And I don't talk about it a lot unless somebody will ask me. And it was just a circumstance of friends that wanted to support me and said, "Hey, you should do this." I'm like, "Okay." And lo and behold, I got to wear the crown for a little over a year. I think, the longest one because they were transferring from their location to new location, so they had to give me like a 1 or 2 month extension. So that was kind of cool. It led me into other environments, and one of them was actually I got asked to go into modeling, and of course I didn't take that hook. I didn't take a bite because I knew my passion was to get my Western education and go back and get my PhD. So that I already knew in my mind that I wanted to be a service to my community and not do something that was individual. But maybe it would have amplified into that service community, I never know. But it also led me into film work. And I did a few documentaries. There was one called Five American Families. It's a PBS documentary. And of course our family was selected. I've done some work with Chris Berry, some of his films, and again, they only know me as Shy. That's what I use in my acting portfolio because that's what they know me as home is Shy. They don't call me Shelly Valdez. It's just Shy. Most of my friends know me as Shy. That's a gifted name of my older sister. She when I was born, that's what she gave me, Shy. And then I continued. It's kind of fun. But then when my son was born, he was interested in acting, and so together we did film work and commercial and poster, and so he's got a really nice outlet of film work, and we belong to a wonderful agency that really is supportive of film. And I also work with, it's really, I've created a lot of wonderful friends. And so the casting agents from outside, and mainly in Hollywood, will oftentimes contact me and ask me, "Hey, I'm looking for a young person this age or an elder this age, can you help us?" And sure, again, there's that portal. Anytime I can create a portal of access for our community members, particularly youth, I'm there. And why hold on to it when you can help others? Why? That's our gifts, our gifts that we've been given. We need to share them with others. Don't be scared to share them, as my grandfather would say. Don't be too stingy to share them. Help others any way you can. And one of those ways is film work. I mean, I've taken casting agents out to different reservations, or it's just looking at locations, helping. I just recently helped. They were looking for a 6 and 8 year old young Native person. I just helped to cast an agent yesterday. Find that person. So I do it because it's really fun. It's relaxing, and I'm honored to if I get selected, I'd be honored to hang out with the film crew, and I'll do it as long as my son wants to do it, and I promised him that. So we'll do it together.
Oh, great. We've talked about your community connections, your allies, your networks. Who do you consider the most important mentors to you over your life in looking back?
In looking back, my father Shelly, my mother Shelly, they were truly my true teachers, mainly my father. Without him, I would have been a dropout in Western academia. Never I hated school with a passion. He was my true teacher. I had some other really wonderful mentors, Dr. Swina, Joseph Swina from UNM, who was on my dissertation committee. Greg Cajete was also on my dissertation committee. I consider them wonderful allies. There's so many, oh my gosh, there's so many that would fill the space. My co-worker, my colleague, Jill Stein, she's a mentor. Isabel Hawkins, she's a mentor. But the youth want to amplify their voice. They're my mentor. They're my heart and soul. And they keep me grounded, and they make me see what is real. The youth are also mentors. They have so much to offer. We forget to put them at the table with us sometimes.
Well, reflecting on that.
My grandmothers.
Yeah.
All my grandmothers.
Well, reflecting on what you're saying about mentors, what advice would you give to young people, especially girls and young women who are looking for personal or professional guidance?
Again, my grandfather, don't be scared to go out and seek your journey. If there's a calling, don't be afraid. And when you're out there, always latch on to a mentor. Mentors are so important. And that mentor can be a grandmother. And I'm also mentored by my clan. I love my clans. I have such awesome clan members that are my relatives. It can be a clan member, it can be an elder, it can be a peer, and it can be a child. Find those mentors. And more importantly, for Indigenous youth, find an Indigenous mentor. Because their worldview is so much different than someone that is not Indigenous. And what they have to offer is their story of resilience. And when you hear that story of resilience, it should create encouragement in you to know that you can do it. If I can do it, hey man, I got a PhD. Anyone can do it. You just have to put your mind, heart, and soul to it and say, this is what I want, and I have a pathway, and I have to keep on that pathway, but who am I going to take along with me? Who do I need? What are my resources I need to take along with me? Because I can't do it by myself. Never, ever forget you can't reach your goals. You can't do things by yourself. You can't reach your goals. You need people to support you. And those are mentors, regardless if they're family members. They are mentors.
Yeah. Well, I have a difficult question to end this, but in your biographical materials, in a historical context, your family's Hispanic lineage can be linked to interim Governor Shelly Valdez from around 1705. What would you say are your important insights to this connection?
Oh, when I announce myself, or not announce myself, but when I introduce myself, I literally tell people I have a bittersweet relationship with myself. And by that definition, I mean I'm of conquistador blood. But my heart is Pueblo. my DNA is also filled with conquistador blood. By that notion, I have beautiful family members from that side. Aunties and uncles and cousins that are just beautiful people. And I would never ask for anything more because they have a rich heritage to also share with me. And that's that bloodline. But you know the histories of our people, and they're hurtful. And that's why, you know, when the Pueblos, when the conquistadors came through the Southwest, they took away our indigenous names, our Pueblo names, and they gave us Spanish surnames. Well, literally mine is Spanish because I am, you know, of that blood. So we're the only Valdezes in Laguna, literally. And so, you know, I carry that weight. We all carry our weight of this historical drama. And that does not exclude me, Rose. I carry the weight of what those two sides went through. And because of that, before I speak, I really try to think, is this going to hurt my family lineage from my other side? Because they have so much love to offer me. So much of everything to offer. How do I navigate who I am as Gowaikan, who I am as Kushjera? How do I navigate that? Because I need the ability to bring them together to make me a stronger person. And do I negate and say that and isolate myself from being Hispanic when I'm in an indigenous environment? No, I don't have to do that. I don't, because I know who I am inside, and I've been gifted by both sides. So I try very hard to honor both sides, because you know, my grandfather, Robert Valdez, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here. And for that, I need to honor both sides.
Well, thank you very much. This was an exciting interview that we were looking forward to. And it's been really, I've learned a lot from you, even though we had discussions before. But this was really great, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And hopefully it will, you know, we want to let people know what contemporary Pueblo women are doing. And that, you know, there's so much professionalism and so much community care. So, you know, we're looking at what are you doing and how does that kind of balance out with your community. And, you know, everyone has pretty much told us it does.
Yeah.
So, and if it doesn't, then, you know, there's something wrong.
Right.
So, so this is really, you know, a great interview, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, and I really want to thank you for honoring me to be a person to serve this role. I'm like, wow, all right, someone wants to hear my story. This is awesome. No, but you know, I really think that, you know, I'm everything I do is, and hopefully this will help children, the youth that can see these films and can see, okay, there's a Native person that I want to continue that same path and embrace who I am as an Indigenous person. And we need so much of that for our Native youth. We need to give them hope. And if you ask any person, and I've learned this because of research, almost every Indigenous young adult that I have interviewed, and almost every Indigenous person that has come out of a Western educational system to get a degree, if you ask them, why are you doing what you're doing? Or any career choice, why are you doing what you're doing? They will tell you, for my people. So we are doing service for our communities. And that's so different from European lens. So thank you.
Thank you.